But the loving kindness of God is for all eternity to those who fear God. God's righteousness is with their children's children. In the way of righteousness, there is life. In that path, there is no death. The dust returns to the earth as it was, but the spirit returns to God who gave it. Whom have I in heaven but you? And having you, I desire nothing else on earth. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. How precious is your unfailing love, O God. We mortals seek refuge under the shadow of your wings, for with you is the fountain of life. In your light, we see life. And the funeral prayers are on page 6. Now chant the meeting group. Although the overt meaning is a bit different, I think what they're saying is
better reasons, maybe.
This is how it is. We need to find our way to accept it and live on with it.
Mio malo mahati korashani mahalo mahal negit kumahaye ishyo vayamu asot amid kolmase mio malo matase auhelio se pinam lahar
Where did you find
the Sadik behold vachav atzur kadmel kavayim umale vachavim Amorena v'chosna rachmani Ilha Adon asifot v'rachavim Sadik atadona mikal chayot Asher biyadha bidol kol rubo Chalila v'cha zichronei lipo ויהיה גונאי הרחמים עלינו פה, כי לך אדון הרחמים והסיפור. אדם מבין שנה יהיה הולך שנים יחיה, מה יתבון לו כלא היה יהיה. ברוך דיין האמת, ממית מחיה, ברוך הוא כי אמת דינו, ומשותף את הכל דינו, ומשלם לאדם חשבונו ודינו, והכל ישמוד על היוצא. ידענו אדוני כי צדק משפטך, תצדק בדוברך ותזכה בשופטיך, ואין בהר אחר מידת שופטיך. צדיק אתה אדוני, וישר משפטך. דיין אמת, שופט צדק באמת, ברוך דיין האמת שכל משפטיו צדק באמת. נפש כל חי בידך, צדק מלא ימינך בידך, רחם נח לתעצום ידך ותאמר למלאך את ידך. גדול העצה ורב עלייה, אשר עיניך פקוחות על כל דרכי בני אדם, לתת לאיש כדרכיו וכתמים עליו, להגיד כי ישר אדוני מצוי ולא עמלת בו. אדוני נתן ואדוני לקח, יהי שם אדוני מבורך, והוא החום יכבה עוון ולא ישחית, והרבה להשיבה פה ולא יעיל כל כמה טוב.
God gave, God has taken, May God's name be blessed.
In September 1970, sitting down next to Nick at a singles table to lunch at a wedding, I thought with a sigh of recognition, there you are. The starter was a melon boat with a cucumber sail on a cocktail stick and a cherry stuck on the top. As he turned with his engaging smile to greet me, "Here you are, Nick. Would you like a cherry?" I had had some lovely boyfriends, but none with whom I could imagine sharing my life. And I could be finished with someone. My mother would say to me, "Darling, what was wrong with him? He was so nice." But this time, as I sat down to Nick, I knew instinctively I had come home. Later that day at the St. John's flat, Nick had been walking through a cloudburst of rain to reach us. Having been told street number 69, he forgot and started knocking on every single door from 96 until he found me. He arrived, drenched from head to foot, to be immediately loved by the feral cat who had adopted my friends as a source of food and warmth, but would never be cuddled, never voluntarily came up to sit on a welcoming knee until Nick arrived, soaking wet, that is. He went straight to Nick, jumped on his knee, purred like thunder, as Nick gently stroked him. I realised that this wise, battle-scarred old tomcat had the same reaction to him as I had had earlier that day. Ours wasn't a conventional courtship. Nick had been granted a few months' leave of absence from the GLC Architects Department to try and salvage his father's shop-fitting business. But it was irretrievable, and on the afternoon of the day of our first date, the meeting with the accountant's dragged on and on, concluding with the inevitability of accepting liquidation. And so, that he eventually turned up 2 hours late at my parents' house to be greeted by me shouting at him, "Come in if you dare." As all I could see was his hand round the corner of the porch, waving a very grubby white handkerchief. Thank God he dared. He learned soon after from the father's doctors that Sam Abishalom had only a few short months to live. And so it was in this context that we spent our first years, knowing we were together, but knowing also that it was not our time to celebrate. He was managing to salvage something from the ruins, enough to install his widowed mother in a comfortable modern flat. He didn't propose to me, but one evening at dinner with my parents, he told them he thought the best time for us to marry was in the autumn. I spluttered and almost choked on my food, asking, "Well, aren't you going to ask me first?" And he smiled at me and said cheerily, "No." But we tied the knot on 18th of November 1973. And as in all the best fairy stories, lived happily ever after. At first in a little nest in your bosom. In fact, he did eventually propose to me on our golden wedding as the day dawned in our lovely bungalow in the Sensations Hotel by the sea in Zanzibar. He had a wealth of stories to keep me enthralled. He served for 2 years national service and arrived in Korea as at M. Collins of the Royal Engineers as the war had thankfully just ended. He only did need to fire his gun once, and that was to kill a large snake blocking his way as he came down a mountain to the Save the Children orphanage home, where he helped in his spare time. During the night, He smuggled into his warm office a few orphaned children and fed them with sandwiches from the canteen, the cook having assumed that he had a very big appetite. In the days before we met, he had just written off his vintage Alvis. Nick's driving style is the stuff of legend. Ask me or any of the other of his friends. And he was driving a Renault that we called La Poubelle along the flying dustbin. The other means of transport we enjoyed on the occasions when not in use was a 70-foot-long narrowboat, the interior of which he had designed for a disabled children's charity called Waterworks. Many happy weekends were spent inviting friends to join us on the Grand Union Canal. Nick was a gifted architect, fulfilling his determination to be of service to the community by designing social housing and industrial units for the Greater London Council, until Mrs. Thatcher abolished them and devolved their work to each individual London borough. Sandy in Bedfordshire needed to expand with industry and housing to resist the evil intentions of incursion of those neighbouring monsters called Biggleswade. This was why, in the GRC, Nick was affectionately known as Mr. Sandy. After also troubleshooting another architect's project, their chief architect visited Nick in his studio to thank him. At this time, in 1980, we were house hunting again, and the chief architect recommended a very good estate agent in a place called Muswell Hill. And the rest, as they say, is geography. All animals were drawn to Nick, recognizing his spectacular kindness. Even just when rescuing me from marauding spiders, for instance, he would gently catch them and release them into the garden rather than squish them to death. When our present cat, Ruby, would bring in a mouse for us, I would pick her up and Nick would catch the mouse and take it out to the support of Ruby survivors in the front garden where she wasn't allowed to go. My dear friend Catherine, an animal telepath, asked Tui, our beautiful Bermuda cat, to describe us, and she thought for a moment and then said, Ingrid is very fast and very glowy, and Nick is very kind and very loud. Nick was the masculine equivalent of Mary Poppins, in that he was practically perfect in every way. I was as aware of being a woman as he was unaware of women setting their cap at him. That amused me, and I never felt threatened by their behaviour, rather flattered that this gorgeous man had chosen me and never strayed. I had warned him a few weeks after we met that I was falling in love with him, and if he didn't think he was reciprocating, he'd better get out of our embryonic relationship. He laughed, kissed me, and said, "Nah, you'll do till something better comes along." Ask anyone to describe Nick, and they will talk of his high intelligence, his infectious smiles and hearty laughter, his generosity, thoughtfulness, his sensitivity to others, diversion of society, his support for me and everyone in his orbit, his fun, his sparkle, the ease with which he gave to charities, and his ability to make everyone feel seen, heard, and valued. A true Sadiq. He took adversity when it arrived as a challenge. For instance, we had failed on a couple of occasions to journey along the Silk Road, and he readily accepted that we should try a third time, only to break his hip a week or two before we were supposed to set up. He had a heart full of love, and he was so devoted to his big brother Alec and all the family and friends in Israel. worrying about them during their many incidents of war and terrorism attacks. Together, we created a warm and welcoming home that in a certain area of the Upper Galilee is referred to as Kfar HaPortismere. As we house and care for kibbutzniks, their children, their children's children, their friends, their children, and so on. Every anniversary and birthday, I would write him a few lines of doggerel verse. This latest is still hot off the press. And this is many happy returns. Those many happy returns on your 90th birthday. We've had momentous things galore, interesting times, some great, some small, throughout this year, like not before, like Sai Lagoon, South Mali Atoll. The Maldives was our best story yet. Relaxation with a healing vibe in massive measure. I will bet a finer break you can't describe. Talking of breaks, you broke your thigh attempting to give the lawn a sprinkle. So for the time, you're far from spry and far aback when you tinkle. By doctors, nurses, and their ilk like porters, physios, and such, you cared for well. No road of silk will travel, but I don't mind much. No fearsome heat, mosquito bites, and camel trips across the sand. And we won't marvel at the sights in Bukhara and Samarkand. A wall jumped out and bit our car, and then all the front ham had to dangle. So we bought a lovelier Jaguar that's smaller and easier to handle. We welcomed Oriane and Nir and little Mai, cute in Dior, to live in London with us here. The three of them we do adore. With Clefton Trip plus B&B, dear Marvel has gifted your 90th year. We'll be in the lap of luxury with mending him if the brave cheer. No single day. Every moment I hold dear. Since I did something on that, I touched this eventful year with all my heart and love my dog.
So this is from the four brothers, Nick nephews. Funerals are an opportunity to reflect on a person's life, but as I started writing this, trying to reflect on Nick's life, I really couldn't separate Nick from Ingrid. After all, they spent quite a lot of their lives together. So what I have to say, which is on behalf of myself and my three brothers, to some extent is a reflection on both Nick and Ingrid's lives. My first memory of Nick was as a child when he drove Oran and I in his old car, which I think was an Alvis or something like that. It had huge external headlamps and a sunroof that opened up, which allowed us to stand on the seats with our heads outside. We thought he was the coolest uncle in the world. Other than Ingrid, Nick's other passion was driving. Now, I know we're supposed to say nice things about Nick's, but unfortunately, our early youth aside, I have nothing nice to say about his driving. Anyone who rode with Nick knows what it feels like to constantly be given shocks of adrenaline on the way to a restaurant. What I would give now for one more crazy ride with him. I don't think Nick had too many pet hates, but one was technology. He liked simple designs that worked reliably, not fancy gadgets with bells and whistles, which doesn't explain why he fell in love with Ingrid, considering she's all bells and whistles. And ironically, absolutely loves technology. I remember him complaining about their toaster at home. This will do anything you want, including making you a cup of tea, he said, followed by, All I want is a bloody piece of toast. Nick and his brother, that's father to us, Alec, had a few things in common, but one of the outstanding traits was humor. Now, that's something Nick possessed in spades, which I suspect is another reason Ingrid fell in love with him, because laughing is one of Ingrid's favorite hobbies. Anyone who spent more than 5 minutes with Nick and Ingrid know that a large portion of that time is spent laughing and, of course, eating at nice restaurants. Another favorite hobby. Generosity has always been Nick and Ingrid's mantra, and when it comes to hosting guests at their home, they turned hosting into an Olympic sport. Their home has always been a sanctuary for visiting friends and family. For family members, in particular, Nick and Ingrid's nephews and great-nephews. The minimum stay was 3 months. When adding all the time spent by their nephews and great-nephews at their home in Muswell Hill, it comes to about 20 years of residency, which I think qualifies them as foster parents. And I think this is a reflection on what wonderful people, and as it turns out, foster parents they are. There are lots of things my brothers and I would like to say about Nick's wonderful life and with Ingrid, but ultimately we just want to say, Nick, you mad, wonderful, crazy uncle. We love you and we miss you terribly. Love, Oran Eldad, Gillian Draw. Thank you.
I've always had the belief that Ingrid and Nick are my surrogate grandparents. They're not just only my cousins, but auntie, uncle, grandma, and granddad all in one, which is quite a feat. Both of them have been a constant in my life, always there to celebrate with me and letting not just me, but my friends invade their home from time to time. It is so beautifully clear to me that Ingrid and Nick are and always will be soulmates, with the kind of love everyone hopes to find. There's a long list of things I will miss about Nick, but to keep it short, I only name a few. The stories about his jam-packed life, like arriving in Korea one day after the war ended. The paper maps he'd bring out to show me how to get around the city instead of letting me use Google. Our early morning conversations in the garden, where he justified his cigar habit by saying, well, you don't actually inhale. Him pointing out my new piercings or hair colour, which I'm convinced he secretly loved. His questionable driving skills that made me feel like I was in a Fast and Furious movie. And always calling me and my mum trouble. Most of all, I'll miss his hugs, him being on the other side of the telephone, and being at the end of every train track. Nick, if you can hear me, I love you and I miss you so, so much. Goodbye for now.
Thank you.
Today is incredibly hard, but it also reminds me how lucky I was. Nick wasn't just my great uncle, he was so much more. He was a father figure, a mentor, and a friend. Losing him hurts deeply. Nick had this incredible way of walking into a room and changing the whole atmosphere without even trying. His sense of humor was completely his own, effortless, sharp, honest, always perfectly timed. You could arrive upset or stressed, but you could never stay that way around him. Even when you tried to hold on to your mood, he would find a way to make you laugh. Ingrid can confess. He had that rare gift of breaking through anything heavy and reminding you that life is too short for anger. We used to laugh that he was the Antichrist of fashion. He never cared how he looked, never cared what anyone thought, and that somehow made him even more lovable. Ingrid and I would tease him and say that at least he was pretty, which always made him smile in the quiet way of his. There was something freeing in it, something that taught me that what matters isn't what you wear, but who you are. Nick and Ingrid together created a home that felt like shelter from the world. Their door was always open. People walked in carrying whatever they were going through and somehow left feeling lighter. Family, friends, or even someone they barely knew, everyone was welcomed with the same warmth. Their home became a place where you could be yourself, where you felt looked after without ever needing to ask. When my wife and I made the move to London, I rang to say to Nick that we'd stay with them for not too long, not more than a week, I promise. That 1 week quietly became 3 months, and those months turned out to be some of the happiest and most comforting I can remember. That was the kind of home they created, and it came from the love they built together. At his core, Nick had one of the biggest hearts I've ever known. He was scrappy and tough and full of character, yet beneath it all, he was soft and kind. He cared deeply for people. His stories, his laughter, his stubbornness, his stories, losing him hurts deeply, but even now I feel the joy of having shared so many years with him. I feel proud to speak about him, proud that he was part of my life, proud that I was part of his. Uncle Nick, I know you're watching us from above, probably sitting there with your cigar, smiling because there's no one left to tell you to put it out. You were truly one of a kind, and you filled our lives with love and laughter in a way only you could. I promised to look after Ingrid. I will stand by her, support her, and make sure she never feels alone. I know that would have meant everything to you. May your soul rest in peace. I love you, and I will carry you with me always.
And just having seen the last days how you looked after Ingrid, you're doing that. We're going to go out and accompany Nick to his resting place.
Et maintenant, que vais-je faire de tout ce temps? Que sera ma vie de tous ces gens qui m'indiffèrent? Maintenant que tu es parti, toutes ces nuits, pourquoi, pour qui? Et ce matin qui revient pour rien, ce cœur qui bat, pour qui, pourquoi, qui bat trop fort, trop fort. Et maintenant, que vais-je faire? Vers quel néant glissera ma vie? Tu m'as laissé la terre entière, mais la terre sans toi c'est petit. Vous mes amis, soyez gentils. Vous savez bien que l'on n'y peut rien. Même Paris crève d'ennui. Toutes ces rues me tuent. Et maintenant
יושב בסית העליון בציר שדי תלונה, ומעל אדוני מחסי ומצודתי אלוהי אבטח בו, כי הוא יצילך מפח לכוש, מדבר עבורות. בעברתו יעשך לך, ותחת כנפיו תחסה, צינה וסוחרה מיתו. לא תירא מפחד לילה, מחץ יעוף יומם, מדבר באופן יהלוך, מכתף יפשוט צהריים. יפול מצדך 1000, ורבבה מימינך, אליך לא ייגש. רק בעיניך תביט ושילומת רשעים תראה, כי אתה אדוני מחזיק, עליון שמת מעונך. לא תאונה לך רעה, ונגע לא יקרב בערולך, כי מלאכיו יצווה לך, לשמורך בכל דרכיך. על כפיים יישאו לך ותיגור באבן רגליך, על שחל ואפתם תדרוך, תרמוס כפיר ותנין. מבי חשך רפלתהו, אל תגבהו כי ידע שמי. יקראני ועיניהו, עמו אנוכי בצרה, חלצהו ואכבדהו, אורך ימים אספיהו, וערהו לישועתי. אנא אדוני, מלך מלא רחמים, אלוהי הרוחות לכל בשר, אשר בידך נפשות החיים והמתים. אנא קבל נא בחסדך הגדול את נשמת רבי נחום מנדל בן זלמן ראובן הכהן, ניק קולינס, אשר נאסף אל המות. God and King full of compassion, God of the spirits of all flesh, in whose hand are the souls of the living and the dead, receive in your great loving kindness the soul of Nick Collins, Nachum Mendel Ben Zalman Reuven HaKohen, who's been gathered to his people. Have mercy on him, pardon all his transgressions, for there is no one so righteous on earth who does only good and never wrong. Remember to his credit the good, kind, loving, and righteous deeds he has done. Let his reward be with him and his recompense before him. Shelter his soul in the shadow of your wings. Make known to him the path of life. In your presence is fullness of joy. At your right hand, bliss forevermore. Bestow on him the great happiness stored up for the righteous, as it's written, how great is your goodness that you have stored up for those who fear you, which you bestow on those who trust in you before the children of men, and binds up their wounds. Grant consolation to the mourners, strengthen and support them in the day of their sadness and grief. Remember them and their families for a long and full and good life. Put into their hearts the love and reverence for you, so that they may serve you with a perfect heart, and let their latter end in peace. Amen.
Amen.
Together in Hebrew, Ye'ish asher yimot nachamenu, hein anochi anachemchem, ובירושלים תנוחמו. לא יבוא עוד שמשך, ירחך לא יעסק, כי אדוני יהיה לך לאור עולם, ושלמו ימי אבלך. בילה המוות לנצח, ומחה אדוני אלוהים דמעה מעל כל פנים, וחרפת עמו יסיר מעל כל הארץ, כי אדוני דיבר.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמה רבה בעלמה דיברה כראותה וממליך מלכותה בחייכון ובמיכון ובחיי די כל בית ישראל בעגלה בזמן קריב ואמרו אמן.
יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעלמיה. ברח וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמעתי קודשה. בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושלטה ותשבחתה ונחמתה תגמרן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהא שלמה רבה מן שמה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. זה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
des nuits entières. Au matin, je te haïrai. Et puis un soir, dans mon miroir, je verrai bien la fin du chemin. Pas une fleur et pas de pleurs au moment